Hey guys, I'm David. Welcome to the Weird Kid Show. It's awesome having you here today. So today I have an interview with Alex Lohmann from when Hinges Creak and Reindeer Manor down there in Texas, a haunted attraction. It's really was a pleasure meeting this man and getting the opportunity to talk to him. So check this out. All right, guys, for me, it's a special treat. We're here with Alex Lohmann from When Hinges Creak.
That's me.
Welcome to the Weird Kid Show, Alex. It's awesome. It's awesome having you here today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I'll tell you right off the bat, once I discovered you, and I'm going to tell you how I discovered you. You guys should have a little, what do they call that? A little subtitle underneath the title of your company, When Hinges Creak. It should also say a one-stop mad scientist shop, because the way I discovered you, I don't know if you know or do not know, I'm a member of the Trio of Terror, which is myself, Keith from Cobwebs and Candlesticks, which I texted and let them know that I was going to be interviewing you today. He said, tell him that I love his stuff, okay? And then we have Vic Springson from Monster Misfits. But Keith was at Transworld this last go around, and he did a big video of the whole show and everything. And he came to your booth, and I was awestruck because one of my favorite things to build is mad scientist contraption. And I think probably the most epic Halloween display revolves around having a mad scientist laboratory. I mean, who doesn't love a laboratory, you know? And but up until recently, I've had to resort to creating stuff from junk, you know, old gauges and stuff I find. I've actually taken those little bubble gum containers, little domes. You put the quarter in, and you get you a little gum. And I've actually taken those and painted those and used those as a little lens for my lights and stuff like that. But so when Keith went through with the camera on all the stuff you got, I was absolutely blown away, and I'm kind of dumbfounded as to how you slipped under the radar, because I could have used you guys as help decades ago. So let's begin. First of all, what got you started? What brought you down this path that you're on now of creating these contraptions and stuff like that for the industry?
It kind of like a lot of things. It started out as kind of a gradual thing. I started haunting in 1999, and as time went by and I got further into it and further into it, I knew at some point it was going to consume my entire life, and it does, which I'm fine with. Um, Honestly, a lot of why I started the company, there were really just a lot of things that I wanted for myself, and I needed multiples of. It started out with simple things like switches and outlets and stuff like that, but things that I might find, it would be one thing to find an object. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I first started getting out of working on cars professionally and getting into haunting and sets and stuff like that was, my mentor gave me a huge piece of advice. And he said, decorating is often not about having something, but about having a lot of somethings. And that was kind of my motivation for it, is I needed a lot of these things to really sell the story that I wanted to sell. And after we put them together, and I made my first couple of molds, which were kind of rough and sketchy, and I got my feet a little bit wet. Some local shows started to ask, I'm like, hey, could I buy a handful of these things or those things? And then I thought, well, okay, there's some stuff that I wanted, but I was a little afraid to make the molds for them because I only needed a handful and the mold cost. But if somebody else wanted to buy a handful of them, then I could maybe do a little better. And what we ended up doing is 10 years ago, we've been Transworld attendees for some time by that point, but I decided just to go for it. I've never been one who's afraid to engage in business and take risks. And I'm one of those, throw it against the wall, and if it sticks, it sticks. And if it doesn't, you hit the floor as hard as you can, you get up, you dust yourself off, and you start over. So that was my attitude towards it. I mean, I'd failed plenty in my life, so I wasn't afraid of failure. Um, and we took two easels that were a couple of feet wide and about 3 feet tall. And honestly, on my time hop on my Facebook, when those pictures from 10 years ago pop up, it's been kind of a neat little arc of, I remember last year when I started, and over time I was a little embarrassed at how humble the first set was, and now I'm kind of back to a little impressed with myself as how far we've been able to take it. But we took a handful of products that first year, and we had just come off of this rash at the trade shows of scam sellers who would make three or four things, take them to the show, and they would take 50% deposits and then vanish. And it was
Oh, yeah,
for,
we could tell you about that. Yeah, we know well.
and it still does happen from time to time. So our attitude the first year out was, we'll take as much stuff as we can afford to make. And it seemed like so much at the time. And it's laughable now, but um I mean, I remember, me and Jennifer having to like really make the decision, do we want to make more than this? And I mean, we spread ourselves as thin as we dared, but we knew we needed to take stuff. One thing that helped is, by that point I was pretty well known in the industry. And at that time I looked a lot different too. I went 12 years without wearing pants. I always wore a kilt. And I had hair then, which I don't anymore. And I had a mohawk back then, and I wore a lot of very outlandish outfits. So I was, people didn't necessarily know me. They didn't know about my work or the quality of my show, but there was some degree of, I've seen this guy for years at trade shows. So I guess we're a little safe placing orders with them, and place orders they did. And that was the first year the show went to a 4-day show from a 3-day show. And the long and short of it is, by lunchtime on the first day, we were operating in the black. And now, granted, we're talking a very scaled down company model at this point. Just, as small and as humble as you can get. But I kind of felt like maybe we were onto something. So as time went by, we expanded the product line a little further and a little bit further. And um, I'm a big stickler for details in haunted houses. That's what I like. I mean, kind of like your mad scientist sets. I wanted to be parts of those things. For me, the set detail is what helps tell the story of the show, and it kind of helps the haunt. Make no mistake, my attitude is, the actors always make the show. I can take my staff of actors to a Walmart parking lot on a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and they can scare people in the broad daylight if they have to. But
Yeah.
A haunted house without a staff isn't a whole lot to write home about, but it does kind of give itself the ability to become kind of its own character if you really flesh it out right, and
Yeah.
it tells its own little story. And it also, something I'd learned early on in performing was that, I mean, wigs and costumes and effects like that are often as much for the benefit of the performer as the audience, and it helps them escape into this character. And it kind of helps our staff do the same thing. It kind of helps the staffs at these shows ingrain themselves a little bit further in there, because there's little details in there. And basically, it was just something that I just kept chasing and chasing and chasing, and always trying to come up with new pieces that were neat and interesting, and otherwise might not be something people could get their hands on. And most importantly, too, I wanted things that were safe. I didn't want sharp, rusty metal. I didn't want sharp, torn up pieces of brass. I certainly didn't want glass anywhere. I didn't want 110 volts. I didn't want people to have to deal with conduit. I wanted stuff that was, even if it was in a customer hallway and customers had the ability to touch these things, they could break them. Obviously, if you've got somebody who's determined enough, they can break anything. But it was really important to me that it was something that people could utilize anywhere. It didn't have to be behind glass and hidden away. It could be like, kind of front and center. And I didn't want people's fire marshals to be leery about them using our product and things like that. So that's kind of been the direction we focused on and stayed focused on.
Very nice. So has this you're not doing the hunt anymore? Is this consumed the this is what you're doing now, or are you still
Oh
doing
no,
it?
I'll never stop haunting. There's no way. I don't really act in the shows much anymore. There's some off-season events I still act at, but for the most part, um, we just kind of take care of the management and let the staff do all the acting now. But that was part of the reason I wanted to set this company up the way I did. And our primary focus as far as trade shows is Trans World, and that's mainly because after Trans World, well, after Haunt shuts down, we have what we call Twilight Time, which is kind of this Thanksgiving to Christmas lull where things are a little bit calm. And then once Christmas is done, we ramp up for Transworld, new products, get things built and made and ready to go. After Transworld, we fill orders for a while. And then as those start to taper off, then we start to ramp up for haunt season. And then once we get to that point where we're done, we're ready for inspection, we have the last minute orders for the prop company come through, and there are plenty of times where we're running them simultaneously, or the prop company might take on a custom piece that happens at an odd time of year. But for the most part, it kind of gives us two very distinct tracks on our calendar, and it keeps us busy, and it also keeps all of our eggs out of one basket. But sometimes the haunt's not as lucrative as we would like, but the prop company can kind of help prop that up a little bit. Pardon the double joke. But
Now, will you be attending MHC this year, or?
I don't generally do MHC only because Fright Props is a wholesaler. When we set everything up the very first year, we set up was on Wednesdays at Trans World. The owner of Fright Props came over and he saw what I was making, and I was in awe that he stopped at my booth because I adore that guy and his attention to detail and the way he operates. And he was like, if you would ever be interested in wholesaling, I would be interested in wholesaling your stuff. And I panicked. I told him, I said, let me get my feet a little bit wet and make sure this is going to work. I said, man, I hate to commit to something I can't do. And then about 7 months later, I wrote him. I said, okay. I said, this is going to work. This is a thing. People like it. So we sell through the Fright Props catalog as well. So since they do MHC, they will normally take a display of when Hinges Creak product with them. So
Right, so you don't really have to be there.
Yeah, is show up and just kind of compete with myself. And
Yeah.
so we go every handful of years strictly as attendees just to kind of check it out and see what shows they're doing tours of. And you don't really have to twist my arm too hard to get me to go places and look at haunted houses. But we do Trans World, and then there's a local show here called THC, the Texas Haunters Convention. And we normally vend at that one. But those
Alan Hop's neck of the woods there.
Yep. Yeah, Alan and I have lived within just a handful of miles of each other for the last 20 years or so.
Okay, so you're out of Texas then.
Yeah, we're out of Red Oak. We're just south of Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah. When I met Alan, he was the creative director at Screams, which is actually a little bit further south than us. And my wife was talking to him about airbrush stuff, and then we all just kind of became friends, and we've been friends ever since.
Yeah, he's very, very generous with his knowledge. He gives it, and he's helped me out a lot too.
Alan is he's a sharp guy.
Yeah, he's one of these people I can text, I can send a Facebook message, and he'll answer and talk me through it, and has even offered to Skype with me to help me through certain things, and that's he's a stand-up guy, he really is. So now let me ask you, let's go even further back. Let's forget about current affairs for a minute here, and let's go back to a young little Alex running around, let's say 10 years old. What were you doing? What corrupted you, so to speak, to be into all of this stuff?
I have a very specific story that happened at age 10, but I would actually like to go back a little bit further than that even.
Okay.
When I was 3.5 years old in 1979, my parents splurged and bought this thing called cable. And
Uh-huh.
all we knew is that we were going to have more channels than we had had before. And one of the very first things I ever saw that really struck me, it turned out, and I didn't know the name of this for a long time, but it was Christopher Lee playing Dracula um, in Taste the Blood of Dracula.
Hammer horror. Yep. No, it was.
And that movie had this incredibly profound effect on me. Just the Victorian age and the English accents and the clothes and all of that. And right around that time, I might have been a little later, like Halloween when I was 4. My grandmother bought me one of those cheap blow molded. It was a Bela Lugosi style vampire Dracula mask with a little elastic band in the back. And I remember putting it on and eating Smarties through the little hole in the front that they put in there. And fun fact, 48 hours ago, I was actually lying on Bela Lugosi's grave in Hollywood.
Oh,
Just
wow.
to pay homage and thank him for that specifically. It's weird this comes
Yeah.
up today, but that it took me a long time to put into words why that movie was so profound for me. And as I got into music and art and creations of just entertainment for the sake of entertainment, it what really boiled down to is it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to be Dracula, or it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to look like Christopher Lee, as much as I wanted the ability to make people feel the way those movies and characters made me feel. I
Right.
wanted to move people the way I had been moved, and I really felt like in a lot of ways I was just rechanneling what I was taking in and kind of passing that back off.
Mhm.
So I was a huge fan of horror growing up, and Fright Night when that one came out was a huge one for me.
Mhm.
Um, and any and all of it really. My brother had some fake blood and some of that waxy fake skin, and I remember playing with that quite a bit. But when I was 10 years old, I started to develop an interest in making and tools, and was starting to really grasp the concept of cutting and fitting and measuring and how I don't I'll reticent to say how geometry worked because I wasn't really thinking in those terms, but I was starting to understand the relationship between moving parts. And when I was 10 years old, I told my dad about a project that I wanted to make. And he took me to the Home Depot in Garland, Texas, and he bought me a 2 foot stick of 3/4 inch copper pipe. And
Mhm.
he gave me a welding glove, and I went home and for I'm Dave, at risk of sounding like I'm exaggerating, I think I spent 7 solid weeks every day in the garage with a hacksaw with an old dull blade because I didn't know that they dulled, just cutting painstakingly this copper, and I made a Freddy Krueger glove out of it.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
I had it forever, and I was the only kid I knew that had a real copper Freddy Krueger glove, and
You
it was
you
very
braced the blades on and
yeah.
everything,
My
huh?
dad had to do that part for me. I had to cut them all out and get them ready and file them so they fit each of the fingers. And I don't even think all 4 fingers were exactly the same. I think I started with the index, and as I went on, they improved a little as I think this side of the glove looked better than this side.
Uh-huh.
Um,
But how old were you?
I was 10 years old.
10 years old. I mean, that's expected, but even then, that's an impressive feat for a
Yeah,
10.
it was, and I didn't realize it at the time, but my brother tells me now, he's 7 years old. He's like, it was then when I saw your determination to build this thing. He's like, this guy's into this stuff, and this is just who he is. But
Monster Kid.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it was because I wanted to complete a Freddy Krueger outfit. I wanted it to be relatively um, legitimate appearing. I remember watching that opening scene under the credits. I can still hear the music in my head, but where he picks up that tattered paper bag and you hear him breathing and he sets it down and he dumps all the pieces out on the
Yeah.
table and he starts linking them together. And I hundreds of times I must have watched that, but I wanted to put together a costume that would make people feel in real life like Robert Englund made me feel from the screen. And at the time, I just wanted to be scary like Freddy, but there's underneath it all, it really is just that I just want to convey that feeling through myself of him onto to other people and make other people feel the same way I did. And it wasn't particularly important to me if they found it scary or impressive, or if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I just wanted to elicit a reaction out of people, which that did.
Yeah.
Right before I had built that, earlier that before school had let out, I built a guillotine in the garage. I remember getting a circular.
One scale then, like a
It was 96 inches tall. Well, it was 8 foot 3 inches tall because it was an 8 foot frame on top of two sets of 2x4s. And then my dad gave me a piece of aluminum diamond plate to make the blade. And I remember I had to cut two parallel slots in each 2x4 and then get in there with a screwdriver and a hammer and knock the material out between the two.
Yeah.
And nail these things together and make this. And my mother she was mortified, absolutely mortified. I wasn't allowed to bring it into the house, and she was. I think after about a year and a half, I think she finally insisted that we dismantle it and take it apart. But I wish I had it now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's probably better that I don't. I would probably just end up doing
But
something.
did you use it for Halloween that year, or like?
I don't even remember if I used it for Halloween. I think it was just one of those things that I just had to build and it just had to work. And I even
Yeah.
got a file and tried to put a little bit of an edge on that diamond plate and chop pencils and chopsticks in half. And,
So it almost sounded like, because me growing up, I'm a monster kid too. I think I'm a little older than you, but my first exposure is all black and whites. The Universal monsters, the Bad Bee monsters, Godzilla, and the Hammer horror films and stuff like that. But my evolution was, I started building the model kits. Did you do some of that? Sound like you almost skipped that and went right in.
I kind of did. I was born in '76, and those had kind of fallen out of the favor by the early '80s, at least around here. I remember finding model cars when I was about 7 or 8. We found a human skull model that was like 3/4 size, and I did buy one of those and put it together, and I had that thing. It kind of disintegrated about 5 years ago. I found parts of it in a box, and it had just started to delaminate and come apart. But up until then, that was really the only like horror model I could find. Like the old Universal monster kits and all that was all before my time.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome though. So now here we are, and you were at Transworld. It looked like you had a heck of a big display there.
Yeah, we built a new display this year. I try to keep the display relatively fresh, and I don't like things to kind of get tired and old, and I like seeing new stuff. And this year we did it was a 10x30 for Hinges, and then we did a 10x10 for our makeup line and our UV products and stuff like that, which we also sell. And then next year, since the trade show floor is shifting around a little bit and moving, we're going to be doing two 10x20s next year that are going to be across from one another. But we will still be the first booth on the left as you come in.
Okay. And so, just the people that don't are not familiar with what you offer. I saw things like some crazy things that I thought, man, that would have been a molding nightmare. Is the full size valves?
The gate valve, yes. I'm
Yes.
the only one in the shop who does those.
Yeah, I happen to work in an industry where we actually use those in real life. They weigh a ton.
Yes.
So I could imagine like trying to mold something like that would have been a feat within itself.
It's tricky, especially when it's something that you have to be able to pick up and move and manipulate. It gets a little bit tricky because, yeah, I mean, even with the the handle up, and I think we took the threaded stem out and a few of the other parts. I mean, it was still, I mean, it was probably easily 160 pounds.
Yeah, they're
Um,
heavy. Yeah.
and they're insanely expensive. We got this one. We bought a big giant water tank at an auction one time for something. I don't even remember what for, but this was part of that whole rig. Is how we ended up with it.
Mhm.
Uh, but that mold was, man, it took me a few days to really get that one right. And the reality too is I made a version of it that worked, um, but it didn't quite deliver the consistency that I wanted. So I scrapped it and I shelved it and I started over from scratch and I started over again and
Yeah.
did it different the second go around. And oddly enough, when it's time to replace that one with another one, I think I'm going to take an even different approach the next go round and try to get it a little sharper and a little bit cleaner. And 'cause,
Hmm.
when making a mold of something that has a blind back on it is really pretty simple because you really just have your sides and your top, but you always have this zero line of the back of the piece that doesn't
Yeah.
have to necessarily look in a particular way, but when it's a 360-degree piece, it gets to be a little bit trickier.
Yeah, yeah, I'd imagine. I'm assuming you mold it in silicone and then like build a fiberglass jacket around it, or
Yeah, and this one in particular, I did what I call laying up in milk. There's a particular resin that I like that's a real thick resin that I can add polyfiber to, and then it's almost like frosting a cake, but it's a really, really thick. It's Platsil Gel 25, which is 25 on the durometer, so it's reasonably hard. Um, and it's a matrix mold, so it's a two-part silicone mold that has a two-part shell that clamps on around it. It bolts together, and then that whole thing gets strapped down to the rotary casting machine. We fill it with our material. We have a plug. We strap the plug in, and then we have to manually rotational cast it. And that probably takes, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes. And then we have our cooling cycle where we have to let the mold cool completely before we can handle it or move it again for the sake of the mold life. And
yeah,
there's that one took a little experimentation too, because I have to get foam worked into every nook and cranny of the thing. And it took me a long time to figure out, okay, this many ounces in this part, then
yeah,
this many ounces in this part. And
yeah,
then, of course, you have to adjust for humidity and temperature and all of that, which is always kind of a
all
fact.
that fun stuff, and yeah. But you don't just offer casts of what you sell. I think I saw on your Facebook page these little video clips where, like, some of these gears and stuff you actually sell
Right.
silicone mold, so people
Yeah.
can pour their own as well.
We've had
Yeah,
lots of requests for that, and not everything we make we offer a mold for. There's a lot of it that honestly, the mold cost would be outrageous for your average person. There are some things that I can make molds of where the mold is cost effective and reasonable, but there's a lot of it where unless you're doing a ton, it just wouldn't work. But a lot of it is our hardware and the smaller gears, um, and little stuff like that. Because one of the things we've noticed over the years is someone will say, "I need 175, bolts."
uh,
And then they start building their set, and we're getting close to Halloween, and they realize they're like, I need 184. It's like, how quick could you get me nine more of these things? And then this way, people have the ability to kind of, I don't ever want them to buy a quantity from me and then feel like, well, now I'm limited because I have to build something just with the parts that I have. Uh,
yeah,
and this way too, if somebody's on a budget, and because a lot of haunters are, I mean, if it's a small enough bolt head, you can actually even cast those up in hot glue and
yeah,
paint them, and they're almost indiscernible because we do have a pretty large contingency of yard haunters and charity haunts and people that just don't have huge budgets, and it's like their sets don't need to last forever, but they need to look good at least for now. And
yeah,
that can be a cost-effective way. It's like you can make as many bolt heads as you need until the mold wears out. Of course, molds do actually have a life to them,
yeah,
but
yeah.
um, we try to in that aspect of it, I'm there is a lot of very cheap silicone out there, and we do not use it. uh,
Yeah, yeah,
I use strictly Platsil stuff, and in particular, the molds that we sell is Platsil. It's degassed Platsil 7111. It is one of the most robust mold making rubbers that you can get. And we tell people
much air bubble problem with air bubbles and
right. And then even if they wanted to do a pressure casting, if they were like, I need to, for whatever reason, I want to do pressure castings, or I want my resin to be perfectly clear, and they can still do that.
Yeah.
And it also helps the mold last a lot longer too if you get the gas out of it, and it makes for a more robust mold overall. But I mean, obviously, there's part of me that I can't tell you the backlash I got from vendors who were friends who were looking out for my best interest, and they were like, "This is the stupidest idea you've ever had." They're like, "You're going to make something, and then you're literally going to sell something that makes them not need your product anymore." And I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing."
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll always find stuff to sell, but I've also got, I mean, I have an obligation to this industry and the people that are in this industry. I mean, we're just stewards of it right now. We don't own this. We don't own haunting and horror. And someday we're all going to be dead.
Yeah.
And I would rather leave a mark on this industry after I'm gone that I did things that helped people make the industry better, and not necessarily look back and go, well, Alex sure did make good profit margin on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, honestly, if profit is your first concern, this isn't the industry for you anyway.
Yeah. The flip side to all that, too, is, you might have that one person, like you said, at church that needs to make a lot of something and everything's going to buy that mold. And it is true. On any mold, regardless of what it is, they don't have, the shelf life is limited. So somebody in the know-how could quite possibly buy one of your nuts and then mold it themselves.
Happens all the time.
If they're in that kind of position, then they really wouldn't need your services to begin with, because they could just take a real bulb. All right, so I think it's like somebody like myself. I'm not flush with cash, so I've got. I'm telling you, I beg, borrow, and steal to build my contraption. So something like that, I would use it, and then when the mold is no longer good, then I'm going to come back to you for a new mold. So it's still.
And for the most part, we sell our molds relatively cheap. It's almost cheaper to buy ours than it is to make one. And that's how our hardware is too. I've had quite a few vendors over the year who buy our stuff for their displays at Transworld and IAPA and shows like that. And most of them tell me the same thing. They're like, we don't buy resin in the quantity you do. So they're like, we can't even make them for what we buy them from you for, even at a bulk rate.
Right.
So we do quite a bit of that.
You make up in the long run through volume.
But it's going to be people. I mean, I've had at least one other company order nude parts of mine, make their own molds, and start selling them themselves, until I ran into him somewhere and told him, it's like, that needs to stop.
Yeah.
Now, that is being a recaster is never a good thing.
No, and I it happens everywhere. That's one.
I get that a lot too, where people want me to help build a mold, and it's because they've bought a prop and they want to make copies of it. And I'm like, don't do that. I always feel the same thing. Save your silicone dollars for the stuff you can't get. If there's a great looking axe or a hatchet or like a prop weapon, it's like, plenty of people make them. Just buy those and make molds for the stuff that you can't get.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing when you look at something and you're inspired and you go and build something that you saw,
absolutely,
your own design, your own sweat and tears to engineer it. But it's another thing to do an exact copy.
Yeah, it's one thing to recast something that exists. There are plenty of companies that make similar stuff to me, and I say bring it on. I stand by what we do and the quality and the pricing of it, and I don't own the concept of resin casting. So, I mean, to me, that's just free market. Honestly, what that told me was I was on the right track and I was doing the right thing. If other people saw what I was doing and they were like, we need to jump on that bandwagon, it's like, well, all right, then I guess, I guess this ended up being one of my lesser stupid ideas.
Yeah. Well, I think it's brilliant, because about every haunt that you go to, there is at some shape, or form. Some kind of a mad scientist display with Kenneth Strickfaden inspired, devices, Tesla coils, and but not just that. I saw you had all the hardware to make up a mock-up elevator.
Yeah,
And,
that was something that we actually initially weren't going to do. My thought process on that was, I don't know how many floors their building is, and it wasn't going to be cost effective to make an elevator for 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth floor houses. But we had enough requests for them, so what we did is basically we did a big one and a little one. We did a 6-button or a 6-floor elevator panel, and then a 16-button floor elevator, and people can kind of pick and choose from there. And of course, in the context of the haunted house, I mean, I don't think a lot of your customers, when they see it, that piece just sells the idea of elevator. I don't really think they're thinking, oh, well, this building was only 4 stories high and I see 6 buttons,
It's called suspension of disbelief,
Think,
Yeah. So, I think that's brilliant. Now, let me ask you about the panels and stuff with the lighting and stuff. When somebody gets one of your panels that's lit, do they have to do any kind of wiring to 110, or where's the light source come from, the power?
It's all LED and it's all 12-volt DC. And the good thing about DC is it's a little forgiving on voltage. So really anywhere between 9 and 15 volts does fine. Actually, 2 years ago was the first year our display actually had electricity run to it. Up until that point, we were running everything off 9-volt battery packs.
Nice.
So people can wire them to batteries. Most people wire them to just wall transformers, just 12-volt DC wall transformers. Or if they want to get a little bit advanced, they can get controllers from like fright props, like a peekaboo or a boo box or something like that, and then use that to actually control flashing sequences and things like that. There's a few things like our candles. The LED is inherently a flicker LED. It's just built in that if you just wire it up, it's going to flicker.
Okay.
And the 4-light panel, the red light flashes.
Okay.
For the most part, we put lights in there. They're just solid, and that way people can wire them up however they need to.
That is nice. That's really nice. So you had a good year this last go around at Transworld, and much different than last year. Then you've come leaps and bounds. Then you'd say.
Yeah, last year when the show was pushed up into May, it was still a good show. It wasn't attended super great because a lot of the haunts the year before it had to close.
Yeah.
Due to COVID. And we were one of some of the few that managed to kind of skirt that whole issue. But they put the show back in March this year, and it was probably the most. I mean, it was like the first time it had been in March, and I guess in 3 Marches at that point. But it was very, very well attended, so that worked out very, very well. I was super pleased at how well the show went.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was. I know everyone was watching because it was a rough year, and was not too sure what it was gonna, but all the videos I'd seen from Transworld last year, the people were still hungry for their Halloween, and
yeah, and there's always going to be a contingent of haunts that still manage to open no matter what. I mean, that we did. We had to drive-throughs, but I mean, even during COVID, we kept doing what we do.
Yeah. Okay. So what are your plans for the future? Do you see any is there any items that you plan on adding this coming season here? Or?
Yes. We the big thing for Hinges this year is it won't really be anything our customers notice. We're moving to a new shop.
Okay.
We have been working. Actually, I started out working in this room that I'm in right now on a 6-foot table. That was how I launched this company. But our shop is like a 748 square foot little frame building.
Yeah.
7-foot ceilings, and that's what we've been working out of for the last decade. So we're actually closing on a piece of property next week, and we're building a new shop and a new facility, and
Nice.
we don't have to share our shop space with our makeup room for the haunted house anymore. So Hinges will finally have its own permanent shop. Don't have to share space or have dual use corners and cabinetry anymore. And I'm super excited about that. But we are going to be getting into a lot more fiberglass pieces. We're going to be doing um, things that are a lot bigger. Uh, we're going to expand our mold line a little bit further even. Um, I've had a couple of things on the list in my head in the last couple of years that I've just kind of been waiting on getting space for to make happen. And kind of get those things launched. But there's a very, very rare object I think people would like that I'm still trying to get the final little details worked out.
Okay, sounds like it's top secret, and
It is.
you're chomping at the bit. You want to spit it out, but you think
Yeah,
you refrain.
it
So
is going to be
that's
rad,
good.
though.
That's good for the viewers. So you guys keep in mind now that they got something big coming here. So you're gonna want to keep tabs on their website.
And I'm anxious to see how well all those things go over. And every year, I always manage to find one or two more panels that I just like. Um, Keep things different. I'll see something and I'm just like, ooh, that piece and that piece and that piece, and I have to sculpt this together and cobble that together and fabricate that, but all of it together is going to look just the way I want it to look. And um, it's going to be interesting to see how it all goes. Where it gets a
Exciting.
little bit weird and sticky for us is with supply chain issues and everything else. We haven't been immune. We had to raise our prices this year, which we actually raised ours, I think, a little less than everybody else managed to. But our silicone cost has gone up dramatically. Our resin cost has gone up dramatically. Our shipping costs have gone up, and so that's going to be one of my main focuses too. As we come up with new molds and new products, is to also always keep the some of the cheaper stuff cheap. So when there are people who are on a budget and they were like, yeah, we don't have, thousands of dollars to spend on sets, but if we could get some handfuls of bolts and buckets full of rivet heads, then we can kind of finish out what we've got. We want to make sure that we're able to keep doing those kinds of things and keep those people content as well. Because I've been that customer. I've been that customer a lot. When we first started out haunting, we were always the, in a world where they're selling $25,000 of stuff at a time to companies, we're in there spending $85. And, you know, we kind of treat all our customers the same. I mean,
The struggle is real.
yeah, because I mean, our market really is, it's very vast and it covers a lot of ground. And when people ask me, like, what does it cost to open a haunted house? It's like every dollar and minute that you've got.
Yeah.
And if you've got a handful of dollars and a handful of minutes and you stretch it as far as you can, then that's what it's going to cost. But I mean, for every big giant, mega show out there that's well known, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of little ones.
Yeah.
And I don't want, I want to supply to everybody because their customers being impressed with their show is as important to me as anybody's customers being impressed with their show.
Yeah. Well, if you watch, if you see my show, one of the things that I do, like I've interviewed Ed Edmonds, Alan Hobbs. Now you talking Ed Edmonds. I mean, some of that stuff is the creme de la creme. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars for one prop. The quality is there. I can see the justification for why it costs what it does. Me myself can't afford something like that. Uh, Now, Alan Hobbs, on the other hand, he will share, and that's what I tend to do too, is to share methods of creating something from virtually nothing on a budget, and looking at the variety of items that you offer on the website. It's affordable. I think it's very reasonably
We
priced.
try to keep it priced well, and and for that reason too, because like I said, we remember what it was like when our haunt was just barely struggling along. And I remember going to Trans World and we'd spend a few $100, and for us that was a huge deal at that time.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, that was really stepping out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I know there's still shows like that now who, I mean, as much as they would love a $15,000 animation, it's just not in the cards right now.
Yeah. Well, that's why, because I used to do a home hunt. Uh, the way the industry evolved was interesting because, yeah, you had companies like Distortions where they had this, giant, they had the electric chair, which was like a big
Yeah,
thing when that came out.
that was
Uh,
a game changer.
yeah. Well, then people with the desire to want that but can't afford it, that's where they started to get into with people like yourself, companies that sell like the servos and the pneumatics and stuff like that to build from the ground up, to do it yourself. And there's a lot of them, DIY haunters out there, and there's absolutely no shame in it because I've seen
No,
some of the stuff that people do uh, left to their own devices. Like I would have loved to have seen that 10-year-old Alex's uh, guillotine in the garage. I think that would have been impressive. Or that Freddy Krueger glove. It's art to me. All of this is it's art. It's a means of expressing art,
no.
and then trying to, like you say,
Yeah.
because I know what you're saying when you said Christopher Lee invoked something
Yes.
inside of you. And it's almost, I try to explain this to people that don't like horror movies. They're like, well, how can you watch that? How can you like that stuff? The best way I can describe it is it's almost like a roller coaster ride where you're in danger, but you're really not in danger. You're going to be okay. There's like some kind of a thrill to it. And the same thing with
The
the industry.
samurai had something in their code, and basically it boiled down to die a little each day.
Yeah. Uh,
And it's, I think it's kind of a safe assumption to say that that's what we do both in the haunt industry and with the prop company is people, they kind of like that flirting with death just a little bit. There's that morbid curiosity, and they kind of like to feel like they've escaped something. And I
yeah.
think there's a lot of that, especially now as a lot of what we do is influenced by computer gaming and things like that, whereas it used to be more movies. I think there's a little more of a survivor kind of instinct over. I mean, we this is our 49th season, so we've kind of seen a lot of the ebb and flow of the industry and how things shift and how customers have changed. But people like petty little thrills,
Hmm.
and it's just part of what makes us human.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Well, I uh, I ex- I explained this to you. I'm explaining to my viewers too. Is what I would really like to do is at some juncture I would like to place an order with you, and then I want to do one of my episodes on building. I would like to build uh, one of my Frankenstein. I call it Mad Scientist Frankenstein contraptions using some of your products. And
Excellent. That'd be
yeah,
awesome.
and I think that would be really fun. And I love your product line, and I want to encourage anybody who is not familiar with when Hinges Creek to go check out. I'm going to provide links to your website, your Facebook page, and encourage people to head on over and check out your wares.
Well, and if people are interested too, at Texas Haunters Convention, which happens here in Texas in July, I'll be doing a silicone makeup class.
Oh, nice, nice.
But as a general rule, at the Transworld show, I teach a 90-minute it, it demonstration on silicone mold making and how to
Okay,
make molds and the kinds of silicones and how to do castings and finish work and stuff like that. So
very nice.
um, if there's people out there that are interested in learning how to do some of this on their own, I mean, there's avenues for that as well.
Hmm. Okay, and then what is the name of your haunt if somebody's down your neck of the woods? And
Reindeer Manor.
Reindeer Manor.
Yeah,
Okay,
this
and
is
I can
like I said,
provide
this is
links for that as
our
well. And yeah, there's a
49.
website for that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's reindeermanor.com.
Okay,
And
okay.
this season number 49,
Oh, wow,
open since October of 1974.
wow, holy smokes.
I look very good for 75, right?
That's impressive, though. That is impressive.
It's a neat place. It's unlike any other. We were, the collective we. I wasn't even born when this place launched. I came to own it a handful of years ago and have been working out here and running a couple of my shows adjacent to it for, I guess, almost 18 years now. But um, we've been here since before there was an industry. So everything we've done out here, and there's still a few of the guys from the original days that are still out here and involved. And I mean, there was nowhere to buy anything. Everything had to be invented or fabricated. And
Yeah.
we always kind of done things our own way. And still it kind of carries over into everything else we do. And I guess it's my old punk rock aesthetics of, do it yourself. But I mean, websites, graphics,
Yeah.
marketing. I mean, all that stuff we do in house. If one of the tractors needs an injection pump, I put an injection pump on it. I mean, if we need, the website, redone, then we get our graphics guy to start putting together a new website for us. And we've just always been a very in-house kind of show.
Yeah.
I think it's part of the reason I was so keen on selling stuff for people to make their own stuff instead of
Yeah.
just taking stuff and then selling it to them.
Mm-hmm. So you definitely certainly got a lot of sticks in the fire. Then you're a busy man, pretty
Oh,
much.
it never ends. It
Yeah.
absolutely positively never
Now,
ends.
is it indoor haunt or outdoor? Or is it
So,
under?
we have 4 attractions. Two of them are completely inside. Two of them are partially inside and partially outside. The midway and the main stage, ticketing, photo ops, all of that is mostly outdoors.
Uh, so the indoor haunt, there's always a challenge. A lot of these people that want to start an indoor haunt right off the bat don't realize you have to deal with the fire marshal.
Well, and zoning, and then you've got your economic development departments, and then you have your people who are in charge of enforcing ADA compliance. And then, some cities get grants from the states for allowing certain people to do certain things. And then you've got flood issues, you've got insurance issues. I mean, when people ask me about getting into haunting, the first thing they always tell me is they're like, well, I have great ideas for a haunt. And I always have to tell them, it's like, I don't mean to be a downer, but honestly,
Yeah.
ideas are the easy part. And your ideas at this point, they mean zero.
Yeah.
Um, there's really kind of 3 filters you have to run an idea from. You've got your budget, your labor force or your manpower, and then you have your calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a great idea and it fits within your budget and it fits within the amount of labor you've got, and then you can fit it in the time that you've got and it comes out the bottom, well, then it's still a good idea. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is once you run one thing through that idea, the next thing that comes through, it's like, oh, well, now we don't have the budget for that. We have the manpower, but now we don't have the time to do it because of the first idea. So now by default, the first idea is not a good idea because the second idea is not a good idea. And you've got to kind of balance all of
Yeah.
those things trickling through there. But
Yeah.
yeah, and the fire marshal thing too. I kind of got, I don't know, after I said this, they never asked me to do this seminar again. I was on a safety seminar
Mm-hmm.
and it was about fire safety and all of that. And it was a panel. And I was the last one. I was the new guy, so I was the last one on the end. So when it was like, there's this topic being discussed, what do you guys think about it? Go, 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 go. Um, and we got on the subject of the fire marshal and safety and stuff like that. And everyone kept talking about how expensive lawsuits were. They're like, if you accidentally kill somebody, it could cost you this amount of money, or the average cost of your death and dismemberment lawsuit is this amount of money, or accidental damage or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It got to me, and they were asking me about it, and I said, "Man, this is a little awkward." I said, "But you know, I said all I'm hearing anyone do is complain about how inconvenient hurting somebody would be for them or how expensive it would be. It's like, how about we look at this as hurting people through neglect is just inherently wrong, and
Yeah.
let's just not do that."
Yeah.
Never asked me back. But we've had a very good working relationship with our fire marshal in that regard. I feel like I'm one of the few haunters who, when my fire marshal has a request, I listen because I understand that it's not him being mean or rude or trying to be difficult as much as he's an elected official and it's his responsibility. I
The
mean,
people
because if
say,
anything happens, if I do something to somebody, ultimately they can go back to him and be like, "Hey, why did you allow this to happen?"
yeah.
And I appreciate that position. I
That's a
really
very,
do.
very good. That's a very good way of looking at that. It's very
It
positive
is. I mean,
spin.
it's
It's
super important.
factual. Yeah.
And so many people who are new to this industry, they always ask, they're like, "How do I get around fire code?" I'm like, "Don't get around it. Put yourself right in it." And you can't take it too seriously. I'm probably the only haunter I've ever met that has more fire extinguishers than my fire marshal requires
Mhm.
because I want them.
Yeah.
I want a current tagged in extinguisher anywhere there is a person stationed or anywhere there's a doorway or if there's a big span in between people, I want one there.
Yeah.
I don't make any attempt to hide them. I want them in the open. If a customer comes through and starts a fire, and another customer happens to see it and can do something about it, I'm all for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I worry far more about a drunk person starting a fire than us ever accidentally having. I mean, with as much fire retardant as we use, and with the conduit and the electrical inspection, everything we have to go. I don't worry too much about a fire just happening on its own, but there was a haunt in this market. Unfortunately, there's hardly anyone left who knows his name. Lance Pope had a place called Thrylvania, and Lance was hands down the greatest haunter who ever lived.
Mhm.
And he had an angry drunk customer that security had to throw out, and this guy snuck back in and lit a fire in one of his shows. And they
Oh,
had to evacuate the building and all of that. And
unbelievable.
fortunately, they got it taken care of quick. But human nature is a hard thing to predict. You never really know what people are going to do.
Yeah, I hear a lot of stories of drunk people coming through and wanting to fight actors. And
Oh yeah,
well, why are you here? It's a haunt. The people are trying to scare you, and then you're wanting to fight them. It's
yeah.
ridiculous.
And I've been subject to that myself. And our security has gotten pretty good at kind of sniffing them out, and we'll follow them through if we think they're a problem. And
Mhm.
if they're obviously staggering drunk, we'll just tell them, it's like, you just can't come in. We're
Yeah,
gonna have to. You can use your ticket on another night. But beyond that, especially because I mean it's seasonal work for the actors. A lot of the people we have here are kids who are just 16 and 17, but I mean they're still minors. And
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I can't have drunk people punching my kids in the face.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's unfortunate that has to happen, but well, I think we about covered everything. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, and pleasure to meet
Uh,
you as well.
yeah, and like I said, I'm gonna be putting in an order. I want to build something, so I hope you watch it when it comes out. Uh,
Definitely.
and again, guys, go check out Alex's when Hinges Creak and your website for the haunt. We're gonna provide all the links for that. And again, Alex, I really appreciate it, and I hope to maybe catch up again sometime.
Will do.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. We got to touch base a little bit on the haunt industry, plus the business of selling mad scientist building fodder, if you will. I was really excited when I came across his website, and thanks to Keith from Cobwebs and Candlesticks with his video of Trans World, I discovered these guys. I didn't know they existed, and which is good for me because building Frankenstein contraptions is probably one of my favorite things to do. But as you guys know from my builds in the past, I just tend to use a lot of junk and household items, things that I can find to throw together. This site here, they offer a lot of cool stuff. I'm really encouraging you to go check it out. So I'm going to provide the link to Reindeer Manor. I'm going to provide a link to when Hinges Creak. And what I plan to do, guys, is I plan on putting an order in with When Hinges Creak, and I'm going to take some of these and I'm going to incorporate it in a build. Yes, I'm going to be building more Frankenstein contraptions, but I want to do one specifically using components from their website. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't done so, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell and get notified when I upload future videos. Check out my brothers, Keith from Cobwebs and Candlestick and Vic Springston from Monster Misfits. Together we make up the Trio of Terror. So I appreciate you guys so much. Until next time, peace.